There is a behavior happening in backyards and parks all over the world that most people walk past without ever understanding what they are seeing. A crow standing motionless over the body of another crow. A pair of geese, one of them gone, the other returning to the same spot for days. A small group of birds gathering in total silence around something on the ground, not eating, not calling, just standing there. Most people assume this is nothing, an accident of timing, a coincidence of birds happening to be in the same place. It is not. What researchers have found when they finally looked closely at this behavior is something that changes the way we have to think about birds entirely. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. If you are new here, subscribe, because today's video is about something most people have witnessed without ever knowing what it meant. We are going to walk through 7 documented behaviors that scientists now describe, carefully, using the word grief. Some of these findings are recent. Some of them come from researchers who spent decades resisting the idea before the evidence forced them to reconsider. And the last one we cover today involves a discovery that even the scientists who found it say they were not prepared for. Stay until the end, because number 6 is the behavior that convinced one of the world's leading crow researchers to change his entire framework for how he studies these animals. Number 1, the crow funeral. If a crow dies in a place where other crows can see it, something remarkable happens within minutes. Nearby crows stop what they are doing. They call loudly, a specific harsh alarm that differs from their other vocalizations, and more crows arrive. Within a short time, a dozen or more birds may gather around the body in what researchers studying the behavior have come to call, informally, a funeral. They do not touch the body. They do not attempt to feed. They simply stand, often facing the dead bird, calling sometimes for 20 minutes or longer before dispersing one by one. For years, scientists assumed this was purely about threat assessment, crows gathering information about a danger in the area. That explanation is part of the picture, but researchers at the University of Washington, after running controlled experiments presenting crows with dead crows in different contexts, found something the threat explanation alone could not account for. Crows reacted far more intensely, and for far longer, when the dead bird was a known individual from their own social group than when it was an unfamiliar crow. The response was not just about danger, it was about who. Number 2, they remember the place, not just the bird. This is one of the details that struck researchers the most. After a crow funeral, the crows that gathered will often avoid the specific location for an extended period afterward, sometimes for weeks. Not the general area, the precise spot. They will fly out of their way to avoid a particular branch, a particular section of lawn, a particular stretch of fence line. If this were purely a generic threat response, you would expect avoidance to fade quickly once no further danger appeared. Instead, the avoidance persists in a way that looks far more like what we would call, in a human context, not wanting to go back to where it happened. Number 3, geese and swans form bonds that do not simply end. Canada geese and many swan species form long-term pair bonds, often lasting for life. When one member of a pair dies, the surviving bird's behavior changes in ways that field researchers have documented repeatedly. The surviving goose or swan will often return to the location where the pair last was together, sometimes for many consecutive days. It may call repeatedly, a specific contact call normally used between mates, into apparent silence. Feeding can decrease. Some individuals separate from the flock for a period, choosing isolation over the safety of the group, which in evolutionary terms is a genuinely costly choice for a prey animal to make. Eventually, most surviving birds do reintegrate, and many do eventually repair, But the interval before that happens and the specific behaviors during it are difficult to explain through any framework other than the bird processing a loss. Number 4. The silence that follows. Birdwatchers who spend significant time in one location have reported with striking consistency across different species and different countries a specific kind of silence that follows the death of a bird, particularly a mate or a parent within a small social group. It is not the ordinary quiet of a calm morning. Observers describe other birds nearby reducing their own calling, sometimes for hours, in a way that is different from their typical behavior. This has been harder to study formally than the crow funeral, because it requires the rare circumstance of researchers already present and recording at the moment a death occurs. But the pattern, where it has been captured, is consistent enough that several ornithologists now treat it as a real phenomenon worth investigating rather than dismissing it as anecdotal. Number 5. Magpies do something almost identical to crows, and so do jays. The corvid family, crows, magpies, jays, ravens, shares an unusually large brain relative to body size and an unusually large amount of social complexity. Researchers studying European magpies have documented gathering behavior around dead magpies that closely mirrors what has been seen in crows, including the calling, the period of stillness, and the apparent attention directed specifically at the body. This matters because it suggests the behavior is not a strange one-off quirk of a single species, but something tied to a broader trait shared across one of the most cognitively advanced families of birds on the planet. Number 6, the discovery that changed how researchers study this. For years, the dominant framework treated all of these behaviors as functional, meaning their only real purpose was information gathering about danger, nothing more. Then researchers working with crows found something that did not fit. Crows who had gathered around a dead known crow showed elevated stress hormone levels for days afterward, measurable in their physiology, not just observable in their behavior. Critically, the elevation was significantly higher than what was measured after crows simply witnessed a generic threat with no death involved. If the gathering were purely about practical risk assessment, the stress response should track with the level of danger, not with the identity of who died. It did not. This is the finding that pushed one of the most respected crow researchers in the field to begin describing what he was observing, cautiously but directly, as evidence of an emotional response to loss, not merely an information-gathering ritual. Number 7. What this means and what it does not mean. It would be easy and tempting to say simply that birds grieve exactly the way humans do. That is almost certainly an overreach, and most of the researchers doing this work are careful to avoid that exact claim. What the evidence does support is something more precise and, in its own way, more remarkable. Birds with complex social bonds appear to register the death of a known individual as something categorically different from an ordinary event. Their behavior changes in ways that persist beyond any practical need. Their bodies show physiological stress responses tied specifically to who died, not just to the presence of danger. Whether or not we are willing to use the word grief, what is happening is recognition, memory, and a behavioral response shaped by relationship, not just survival math. If you have ever found a quiet group of birds gathered around something in your yard and felt, without quite knowing why, that you were witnessing something solemn, you may have been right. The instinct that told you this mattered was not sentimentality. It was an accurate read of something real. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen birds gather like this around a death in total stillness? I want to hear what you saw and what it felt like to witness it. If this video gave you a different way of understanding something you have seen before, share it with someone who would find it just as remarkable. Thank you for being here at Backyard Bird Mind. I will see you in the next one.